This is the Hogue Deka, and this is one of the best knives on the market, and it's the best knife for a lot of people, but it still could be a little better. So I got two versions here of the Hogue Deka. First, brief history lesson. The Deka has been around for a little while, and it is quite obviously Hogue's answer to the bug out. When the axis lock went off patent, and Hogue was able to start making their able lock, which functions the exact same way. Little bar here, you pull back, there's no Omega spring in there, blade drops. When you pull that back, flick it out, Omega spring provides a resistance. Exact same design, executed, almost everybody will say a little bit better by Hogue than by Benchmade. When that went off patent, Hogue started making the Deka not too long after, and it is designed very similarly to the bug out. It has lightweight, relatively thin G10 and polymer handles, a 3¼ inch blade, 11 or 110 thousandths blade stock, which is a little thicker than the bug out, but honestly still thin blade stock, and is meant to be a lightweight EDC. And lightweight it is. This polymer version here is 2.1 ounces. On top of that, this is cheaper than the bug out. This is in the polymer version here, this is a $150 knife. In a lot of cases, a $140 or $130 knife. This G10 version, this is marble colored G10 here, can be a little bit more expensive. Prices sort of range on the G10 version now because honestly, they're kind of phasing the G10 out a little bit in favor of these polymer versions, but call it, just 30, 40 bucks higher to get the G10 version. But then the other big difference is that Hogue is using better blade steels. Benchmade still sticking to their S30V, Magna Cut on the Deka. And people got really excited about the Deka I think it was even starting in 2022 and certainly in 2023, because it was a $140 to $150 knife you could get in Magna Cut. That was 2.1 ounces, 3¼ inches, made in the USA at that price point. And it really is an exceptional value. Get that out of the way. If you've got 150 bucks and that is what you can spend on a knife, get a Deka. There is not a better $150 knife on the market right now, especially for your general EDC task than this polymer Deka. If that's what you're looking for, you can end the review right here. But we'll go through this knife. I'm going to focus on the polymer one because, again, this G10 one, which is in 20 CV, by the way, is sort of phasing out a little bit. This is the Deka that most people are going to encounter, and it's a very, very good knife that could still be a little bit better. So first off, you've got two blade shapes. This one here is the clip point, obviously DLC coated. And I believe it is DLC, not PVD they use in the coating. You've got a pretty standard clip point here with a tip that's about even with the back of the handle. Again, 110 thousandths on the stock, so not quite as thin as something like a TRM Neutron. I misstated on one of my other reviews. This was 90 thousandths to 110 thousandths. And then there's a decent sized flat here. So it's not a full flat grind, not even really that close to it. And it drops down to a very thin and functional edge. But the first thing that could be better on this could be thinner behind the edge. If they either stepped up to a full flat grind, or, I mean, that's pretty much what they're going to do. They're not going to do a hollow grind at this price point, or just did a steeper flat grind. This cuts great. This is a great EDC knife, and every task you're going to throw at it, this edge is going to be just fine. Cutting paper, cutting boxes, all that sort of stuff. Working in the garden, even working on a little bit harder stuff. This blade is great. The thin stock makes sure that it is great, and it does come down to a pretty thin tip, which you can see right there. But because of that big flat, it's not as exceptional of a slicer as you would expect. It doesn't give you that holy cow sort of performance that something like a TRM Neutron does. Obviously, if you put a lot of work into sharpening, you can get that kind of performance out of this, but you can even see with how thick that bevel is there. This is a knife that is thicker behind the edge than it could be if the factory ground it more aggressively. But other than that, this blade shape, it's great. It's a standard clip point. It's easy to use. It's versatile. It just works well. And then you've got some great jimping back here, not too sharp, not too gentle, a nice little thumb ramp that extends straight from the handle. It's just a nice, easy, natural place to put your thumb. The blade overall is very good. It's not excellent, it's very good. And then I've got this other one here, the other grind you can get it in is this very cool looking, this is an Alan Elishewitz design, so I assume this blade is his design as well, a very cool looking Wharncliffe shape, where it's flat with a thicker grind toward the base of the blade, and toward the tip you actually got a compound grind that gets thinner behind the edge toward the tip, and sort of also deflects upward a little bit. So you've got a bit of that rising Wharncliffe shape for that tip. And it's a very natural, intuitive Wharncliffe shape. Great for your dry cuts, your utility cuts, things like that. Will not be as easy to pass through material, both because of the general lack of belly. This curve tries to make up for it, but doesn't really do a great job. And just because it is a little bit thicker back here, it's not going to be the greatest for, if you're going to do a bunch of cardboard, the clip point is going to serve you better than this modified Wharncliffe here. But it's a very visually interesting blade shape, much more visually interesting than you tend to get at this price point. It's cool, and it works really well for those utility EDC tasks. So, as I typically say about Wharncliffes, they're really, really good at some things. And cutting through small materials, your twine, your tape, scoring on a flat surface. And if you're trying to make smaller cuts where you're really using that tip and dragging it or piercing it through material, the Wharncliffe is great. For a lot of your more general cutting duties, this clip point with its more sort of neutral design and this belly toward the front is going to be more versatile. I prefer this because I think it can do what the Wharncliffe can do 90% as well, and is way better than the Wharncliffe at some of those other tasks. Like as a garden knife, not even close which one of these I prefer. The clip point is so much better because I've got that higher tip. It's easier to get into and behind stuff. But anyway, those are your blades. And then you've got let's go to the Able Lock here. So the Able Lock is Hogue's implementation of Benchmade's Axis Lock. Exact same Able Lock on their longer running Ritter Hogue series. Exact same interface on the lock there. It's a little bit hard to see. Actually, I've got a big one. This is a way bigger knife, but you can see it there. They do this sort of almost like a biohazard looking thing. Gives you a ton of grip. It's a really nice, secure little button here for the Axis Lock. It sticks out quite prominently from the handles. Let's go back to our Deka. You can see here, it looks a little bit less prominent here, but it sticks out more than it does on most Benchmades, and it's really just easy to grip and actuate. And then same design is used on the thumb stud with a Torx driver in the middle, but it's the same thing. And this little thumb stud and this little Axis Lock here, which has a sort of visual similarity to their pivot here, though I'm pretty sure this is either a design very similar to what TI Connector does, or it might even be from them. It's probably not actually from them and just aping the design. But these little studs on the thumb stud and the Axis Lock give you a lot of grip. They're very easy to use. I prefer them to Benchmade thumb studs immensely because there's more little places to catch your finger without it really ever being abrasive. You can play with this all day if you want to, and it won't become a problem, but it is significantly easier to actuate than anything that Benchmade has ever put out. So I really like the thumb studs here. The Axis Lock itself tends to have a little bit more resistance on the pull than what you get in Benchmades. And that's just a little bit more satisfying to actuate. It also means when you're flicking this out, there's a little bit more resistance on that initial flick, so the detent feels just a hair more satisfying. Hogue has done the Able Lock very, very well. They do a very good job with the bar lock. There is no play. I've never had any play on any Hogue Able Locks I have ever owned. They just do a great job of it. Super secure. It works really, really well. It's the best of what you get out of an Axis Lock. Which then brings us back to the handle. And this handle, nicely manufactured, made in the USA by Hogue. This is a pretty simple injection molded plastic handle. This is, polymer, which means it's, FRN or something similar. A little chamfer the whole way around. Some machine marks here, which give you a little bit of grip. It's kind of like a diamond pattern with the fluting extended further out. It's well done. It's fine. It's not trying to do anything complicated. Everything is flush here. Some of the older Dekas used to run the liner, which, there's a decent sized liner in here, but they used to run the liner all the way up to the middle of the handle, and there'd be like 8 screws on each side of the handle. These newer versions have many fewer body screws and look much better because of it without losing any integrity. There's not really any flex in this handle. Again, there's a little bit more liner, but It's a 2.1 ounce knife. It's still plenty light. So the handle is done very well. Screws are flush, machining is good, executed well. This handle design is great in this grip. You've got a front choil, and then it goes very neutral toward the back, very neutral across the back of the knife. So you've really got a place for your pointer finger, and then everything else just kind of wraps around. I get 4 fingers on the knife easily, and you can also put your middle finger up in that choil and pinch the blade if you need to. It's very good in this particular grip, and it's a comfortable neutral handle. It has the pluses and minuses of a comfortable neutral handle, where you can just pick this up and pull it out of your pocket, pick it up, and it very naturally, you can just grip it, and you don't have to think about where to put your hands. Your hands very naturally just get onto that handle, and you've got some control of the blade. The problem is it doesn't feel as secure. I talked about this quite a bit in my Demco Shark Cub review. But compared to the Shark Cub, these curves are much more pronounced on the Shark Cub, and so the Shark Cub locks your hand in more, whereas the Deka locks your hand in less. Now, granted, if I compare this to the Bug Out, this is much more opinionated than the Bug Out, which has a very neutral handle. I prefer this handle to the Bug Out handle. But not that you're going to be using this that hard, but as you start to push this even a little bit more, because it's a neutral handle, you do have to actively grip down on it a little bit more to keep it from wiggling in your hand, because there aren't a ton of curves that are doing that for you. And this polymer doesn't give you a ton of texture. Honestly, these lines here are more aesthetic than they really are for texture. But it's a solid handle design. It's fine. And at the price point, 150 bucks, would I personally like it a little bit more opinionated? Yeah, but it's aesthetically nice and it's functionally fine. I think the only thing that I really wish they might consider, though Hogue doesn't really do finger choils, is I do wish there was a finger choil here. I think with the way this is designed, you can put your finger up on this little hump here and you can pinch there, but this doesn't quite feel so secure, because if you fall off, you're right onto the back of that blade there, and there's nothing keeping your finger here. I don't ever really hold the knife like this. I stay behind this choil, and you do feel a little far from the blade because there isn't really a good place to climb up onto it, whether it's, a half choil, a full choil, anything like that. That's mostly a personal preference, but I do think for a small EDC knife, especially with a decent sized sharpening choil here, you do feel a little far from the blade. And if I compare that to even, their mini grip version, smaller sharpening choil, and on this one, I can get up on that hump and feel a little bit more secure there. And even when I'm back here, because that smaller sharpening choil, I feel a little bit more connected to the blade on this one. I do prefer the handle on the Mini Ritter Hogue to the handle, on the Hogue Deka here. And, one of the things that is a caveat to that is there is already a decent aftermarket for Hogue Deka parts. This has been a very popular model. The best aftermarket handles for the Deka are probably the Applied Weapons Tech scales. Applied Weapons Tech does great work. They've made a handle for the Deka that's very similar to their Archon series for the Bug Out. It flattens out the scale, puts a nice textured pattern on top. They do a really nice texture on their aluminum handles. If you want to upgrade the handles on your Deka, especially for these polymer ones, that's a great option. 60 bucks, so turns this from a $140 knife into a $200 knife, but made in the USA, really nice aluminum scales. If they were selling that for a $200 knife, I don't think people would have a problem with it. So that's an option to upgrade the handles if you want to do that. And that's pretty much what I've got to say about the Deka. It's a very good knife at an excellent price. Everything is done well, and it's just kind of a good, solid, neutral knife. The Able Lock is a good iteration of the Bar Lock. The blade is good, could be better. Magna Cut is a great steal, and getting Magna Cut at $140 is awesome. The jimping is great. The blade shape is very solid. Nothing about it's exceptional. This isn't a great slicer. This isn't a great blade shape. This isn't a great handle. It's a very good blade shape. It's a good grind. It's a very good handle. One question, just specifically, is, okay, I want a Hogue Able Lock. Which should I get here? The Deka or the Mini Griptilia, meaning the Mini Ritter Hogue? Personally, and I'll have a separate review of this one coming up, I prefer the Mini Ritter. I find this blade shape a little bit more versatile. It certainly cuts better, and I find that this handle, with the little bit of extra thickness and just the way that it does the swells, the grip they put on this G10 here, I still think the Mini Ritter Hogue is a better knife for pretty much any task I've thrown at it than the Deka. It's a little bit smaller, it's a little bit thicker, and it is a tiny bit more expensive. You know, you're talking 20, 30 bucks more expensive. But I prefer that knife between the two of these. It's a much older design, but I think it does the job a little bit better for most EDC tasks. So if you're asking me between these two, I'm going to send you toward the Mini Ritter over the Deka. But lots of people do love the Deka, and that doesn't mean it's a bad knife. In fact, that's a testament to how good the Mini Ritter Hogue is. But that's my thoughts on the Deka. Still the best knife, the best EDC knife below 150 bucks, especially if you want made in the USA, because every knife that I like better is at least 50 bucks more expensive than this one. There's nothing bad about this knife. Everything is executed well, everything is designed well. And if their goal here was to make a good knife that would be good for a lot of people on a lot of tasks and could hit this price point, they succeeded. It could be better. The handle could be a little bit more opinionated or grippy, or hold your hand in a little better. The blade grind could be a little bit more aggressive, but those are matters of preference and not anything I can really take issue with at this price point, with this design, with what they're trying to do, and with Magna Cut and this level of manufacturing at 140 to 150 bucks. If you're curious, get one, you'll like it. You probably won't love it. There's not a lot in this knife that you're going to love. It's super light. It's super easy. It's a tool. Think of it as a tool. If you're buying a knife as a tool, it'll do you great. And that's sort of where the Deka lands for me. Hope this was a good use of your time, and I'll see you again soon.